Hey, all, welcome to the Clock Tower. I'm Colton here with Brandon and Brayden once again, talking about the rest of the stuff that's relevant for this upcoming fall season. This is all of the decks part two, and we're going to lead off with the two decks that performed the best in Springfest, Chainsaw Man and Avatar. We'll start with Chainsaw Man. Massive hits to Chainsaw Man. The Bonder Bomb to the Easy Revenge event and the Stock Soul combo are on a restriction list. You have to choose one of two, and Aki is limited to two. I struggle to see a world in which an Aki top end that only has two copies of itself is relevant. I also struggle to see a world in which Chainsaw Man tries to do the Easy Revenge package without one of the Bonder Bomb or the Stock Soul combo. But Brayden, you think that there's still some life left in Chainsaw Man?
Yes. What we have currently, like the whole package currently, we just, in our last video, we praised Seven Deadly Sins quite a bit for its Stock Soul non-interactive package. Everything up into its finisher, which Seven Deadly Sins has a better finisher. I think that Chainsaw Man's early 0 to 2 package is effectively the same as Seven Deadly Sins, even with the hit. I think the combo being a even harder plus, like the plus itself is harder than the Seven Deadly Sins one. That's assuming you can double Elizabeth. You can't double the Chainsaw Man one, but the Chainsaw Man plus is 2 versus Elizabeth plus 1. I think that Stock Soul combo is actually ridiculous. I think the event package itself, the fact that it can get grabbed off of the Check 3 Brainstorm, the fact that it can get grabbed off the Makima Check 2, and the fact that it can get grabbed off the combo itself, I don't think it matters too much that you can't find the 1-1 event with the Bonder anymore. I think losing the Zone Bomb hurts the deck more than losing the Bond effect, just because there's so many things that a 500 power Zone Bomb can truly just answer and be annoying towards. The main place that this deck differs from Seven Deadly Sins is the top end. Aki being one of the single easiest cards in the game to triple to Trifield, and then being on a free combo made it incredibly potent just by the sheer fact that it got 3 lanes of it every single game. At the end of the day, Aki is effectively, in the way I picture Aki as a finisher, is just burn 1, just Coco Chino for effectively free. And then potentially, assuming you get the beforehand, before the ban list, when you had all 3, you effectively also got a refresh ping as well. So in total, you got 6 ping 1s on top of 3 for 3, with the potential of full triggers and whatnot. After the ban list, Aki limited to 2 definitely hurts, and the Bonder means Aki doesn't hit the 3 to 4 event thresholds as easily. I think it still hits 3 quite enough of the games that each Aki still is a Coco Chino, but your reliance on a third lane, whether it's a bouncer, the double bouncer to deal with stuff on the board, or going for an off finisher play, whether it's the power or the red Denji. Those are both decent options. But I do think that drags the top end down just a bit, which is why it's not still in our contention for the best decks anymore. I still think the deck is incredibly powerful. The early play package and the 2-1 back row, I think, are incredibly powerful still. I think you can actually lean harder into it now that Aki is limited to 2. So you can play this healing stock gen free game even more, and then setting up your triggers. Or you can pivot off into the choice list. 8 choice and choice door have both seen some popularity recently. Specifically, the power level one, being able to answer things like Miron, or at least forcing counters out of Miron, can be quite nice, as well as just being a good 1k1 deck with a decent top end.
Yeah, I definitely think that the choice restriction on that definitely made a difference in it. I think makes it so it's harder to get those Easy Revenge events to hand. And I think having that a little more difficulty getting those events to hand can affect some of the resource generation early, especially as you're trying to spend resources to go get those events. I think that the reach has definitely shrunk with it, but I think so is the floor. With the diminished reach that I think it does have now, we've definitely seen a lot of people begin to switch off of that as a top end and potentially even switch over to the choice. Having the choice top end, but even still potentially have the stock soul package still going to get to that point, especially with something like the power to be able to just help generate additional stock. I think we're still going to see a decent representation for this in the fall season.
But 2 Aki's rough. Like, I don't think there's any getting around it. Like, 2 Aki is rough. You are looking at 3 burn 1s to go with your 2 vanilla swings. Maybe 4 burn 1s to go with your 2 vanilla swings. And it's in 2024, that's not strong enough. Especially if you need to come back in a game where you've been rushed. That's going to be the thing that I think keeps Chainsaw Man from returning to top tier. It needed 3 Akis to have a top tier top end, but with only 2, it's kind of a mid tier top end. I do still like that stock soul quite a bit, and I think that stock soul is going to find a home. But with the way things are looking right now, I think the choice package is going to be, if not the most popular thing at the start of the season for Chainsaw Man, by the time the season's over, I think Chainsaw Man will have pretty fully moved on to mostly choice stuff.
I can agree with that. Maybe we'll see some bar, like the 8 bar list might slip in here and there, just trying to really take advantage of that back row support and like spam out heals. But the Aki finisher hit is probably the most damaging effect for that restriction list for this set.
Spy Family. Pants mid game into either choice or pants top end. It struggles against the best stuff. There's no way around it. It had a pretty decent season, but its top percentage was less than its representation percentage. Like, the counting stats are good on Spy Family, but the advanced metrics are not, is basically how it works. It bats for average and not OBP. It does not have a way to get over slime. It does not have the same damage push as SCS or Hololive, and it doesn't really have a strong answer to Overlord. Spy Family is a really good set, but it's one of those things where it's better than it's everything that it's above, and it's worse than everything that's above it. And there's no like, oh, but it has a good matchup here or a bad matchup. It's very straightforward. It is where it is on the tier list. It's either better than it or not. It's either a good matchup or not. And anything that's above it, just not a good matchup.
I think one of the biggest things with Spy, if this set came out like a year ago, or longer than a year ago, it probably would have performed much better. But I think nowadays, too many level 1 combos get too much power just for existing. I don't think the Fiona is fully, like, every set will just have a random thing that can get out over Fiona, including with force backups out. And you're so reliant on Fiona living cross turn because the plus is not super high quality if she doesn't live cross turn. I think that's the biggest problem with Spy.
Yeah, Spy really, really dominates when its level 1 combo takes the board by storm and then is able to continue living beyond 1 turn. That is like where Spy Family really gets its advantage going. And if it's not able to set that up, it's very much hindered along the way. The level 1 combo is still really good. The ability to be able to top check and rearrange your own deck defensively is still a relatively huge ability and still can get additional cancels on those turns, even if it only lives through that 1 turn. But if there's nothing to follow up that turn, partly due to the limited selectivity of the combo itself, that if its level 1 board is answered, it will have a hard time coming back from that.
The set really does kind of need 2 turns of that mid-game defensive top check in order to benefit off of it as much as possible, both in terms of fixing draws and limiting damage.
Yep. And I think the same thing can be said about like even the 2/2 Tokas when Data Live was the big deck doing. If the Tokas were answered and they didn't get multiple turns of checking, the deck crumbled. The big problem at that time was that nobody could answer Toka. Now it is like when you do it with Spy, yes, the unit is costless and it pluses you one, but that damage try effect isn't just quite enough if it's only there for one turn. I also think that if like Spy, I think has a really unfortunate thing where the best healer in its set is in a color that both like that the Fiona does not work well with. I don't think the Fiona works with green like at all, and that double healer, I think you push your deck too hard to fit the double healer in. If you could fit double healer into like a Fiona list without gimping your whole game plan, I think the deck would be up like at least half a tier from where it currently is.
Yeah, that double heal is really good. It's a great card. I love that card. I love that card specifically in my 8-bar list, which is all green, so I don't have to fix for color, and gets more resources in the mid game, so I can afford to play the double heal. I've played double heal twice in one turn in that list before, where I've healed 4 on one turn. That card is really cracked.
Mm-hmm.
It does not play nicely with this package, though. It's just the color you need to fix for the color, and you don't have the resources to do that. And then also a top end, especially in the 8 pants list, where you need to pay 2 stock for your actual combo.
Yep, and then the yellow builds and choice builds require so many deck slots to actually function. You can't fit green, like you can't fit as much green, and then you're also competing for slots.
Moving on to Guilty Gear, there are a couple different ways this gets played. Standby Bar saw the most play. We saw Standby Salvage coming on with Eno at the end of the year. We're going to see mostly the Ram Lethal Bar stuff with the Standby. Guilty Gear has consolidated into a solid deck that has a limited ceiling, I think. It's very much this is the kind of deck that's going to bubble out of top 8 a lot. A lot of X2s incoming with Guilty Gear, X2s, X3s, because it's definitely good enough. Its fundamentals are sound enough to beat a lot of stuff, and it can also snag wins against stuff that's above it in the tier list, but none of its combos really stand out as extremely good at either 1 or 3.
Yeah, I was really expecting a little bit more out of Guilty Gear on release. I honestly think that unless you're going 8 standby, I don't think standby is the answer, even with the Ramathil. I think hard playing it is like actually better because I don't think anybody in this game lets you resolve double ram or even resolve the ram that you standby out. I think there's too much hate in the format right now for like a rogue like or a half standby deck like this that's trying to standby out a like prime target. We just like we saw it with Standby Hololive. Just look at like the amount of answers people had in their decks for like the single standby Gura. Every deck has a tool that can answer that. Whether they're running it or not is up for you to decide if you sleeve up Standby Bar. But in terms of the other lists, I think that, like you said, Colton, I think they're just all missing like one key. Either like their top end just isn't quite it, or the pieces to get there are lacking just a bit.
Ari Ferreira, Stock Soul Bar, Brandon, you play this list. This is a good deck. It has one problem, though.
So it desperately needs to get that drop search into memory to be able to actually like make its combo go off. There are a lot of things right now that can kind of play around it. Like, for example, Hololive Zeros being rather small on defensively make it difficult to try to get the reverse in a expedient time frame to actually kind of get the combo going. Decks like Overlord can just remove their characters off of boards so they don't have to be crashed into kind of thing. So like there's a lot of ways to play around it right now that can really set the deck back far enough that it doesn't get time to build up the resources it needs.
I honestly think that drop surge is like 1,000 power too big for what it wants to be. If it was 1,000 power smaller, it would be so much better.
I do think that the gimmick of the set is pretty interesting. Like, level 1 combo that swings for a bunch of damage. Oh, you canceled. Oh no, I get a bunch of cards. I think that's fun. I think it's interesting. I think the fact that it also gives plussing to the other player because it's super small is also interesting, right? Like, I think there's a lot to like mechanically about Arifureta, but it's a little bit inconsistent and can be played around. And that's the biggest issue, is that you can literally just, like, if you know what you're doing and you know how to play into the matchup, you can just not let Arifureta have a level 1 game until you get your level 1 game on the board, and then they can't clear your level 1 game, so you're just going +2 or +3, for the rest of the game. So you can dictate terms to Arifureta if you know how to play into it, and that's its biggest weakness.
Hmm. I do think Arifureta has tools that it can like sort of leverage to get around that. Like try fielding the drop searcher, I think is one of the strongest plays I've ever seen this deck do. Just because I can't clear all three without one of them going to, or them crashing the following turn. But it's one of those things where it's like it's a hoop you have to jump through that other decks don't have to. And then even the top end payoff, like the restander's good, the spawns are all good. The burn, like the main phase burning, is all really good. But compared to some of the other finishers in the format, I don't think it's quite like I don't sit there and I don't like I'm not sitting afraid of this like from mid 2 or so.
Right.
Granted, so one of those things though is like you cannot let Arifureta farm resources. Like if you have to like intentionally dirty your stock or something, or like mill climaxes or do something just to eat damage to like keep the game progressing, you might have to, just to like prevent Arifureta from sitting there and amassing 30 stock and like having an absolutely disgusting deck, and or keep stock swap open. Some of these sets don't have stock swap. Some of these sets will cry fight Arifureta.
Azure Lane, it's cats. That's the whole set. 2 cards. It's the whole set. Do you cancel the 4? Do you not cancel the 4? That's the whole game. Honestly, I think the most interesting thing you can do with Azure Lane is just lean all the way into the damage rush thing and play the list that Mark played when we went to trios. Because at that point, you just you stop pretending that Azure Lane wants to do anything other than slam Soul on the board, and you just go for it. I think that's the most interesting way to play Azure Lane, because at that point it's just damage rush. And no one does a good job responding to being at level 3 on turn 4. Like there's just nothing that responds that well to that, and you always have that opportunity when you're playing cats. Also ban cats.
Yep. Cats, terrible. Bad game design. 32 soul triggers in my deck. Perfect game design. Balanced. I love you, Bushi. But overall, yeah, Azure Lane is like a lot of the level 0 game is just outdone by the amount of soul that cats can swing at. Being able to have like to present like 3-5-5 like in 5Ks on the board in like all 3 lanes is incredibly powerful. If you cancel, you're often in a worse scenario because you're still at 0, can't answer cats, and then they hit you for 5-5-5 the next turn, which can like actually just lose you the game on the spot. Decks that don't have sufficient level 0 deck speed will actually get ripped apart. In terms of everything else in the deck, which, yes, you can make the thing all day and say it's just cats over and over again. There are options. X into Shinano. Shinano is a real finisher. It is slightly more than Aki, but you're actually paying a cost, unlike what Aki had, where you can get potentially like burn 1-3 times. I don't think 8 bar is a functional deck because it doesn't generate hand, but anything else into the Shinano I think can work. The typical Taiho into Bismarck list, again, a deck that's quite susceptible to stock swap, especially because we mentioned earlier, cats will push you to 3 first, to push the opponent to 3 first. So you are actually susceptible to stock swap before you actually spend all your resources. But the Bismarck engine with the restand and then giving Mocha to like restanders It's an alright top end. It is probably the highest ceiling for a top end that the deck has, but it can be played around. Restand as a finisher is not exactly the most optimal thing. It's an Ari Ferretta. These big damage push decks do rely a lot on their like level 1 game, like their 0 to 1 games to go well. I do think Azure Lane is going to be strong, and I think it will always be strong as long as like we don't get some major gameplay changes where like people refresh their deck turn 0 or something.
Which I think makes sense. Because like the big thing is when you're playing against Azure Lane, the biggest assumption is going to be cats. So like all of a sudden you're going to be really responsible for managing your own deck state throughout the whole game. Because at any point in time they can just turn around and just intentionally push damage to step into the moments and times when your deck is the weakest.
Playing against Azure Lane turns the game into fundamental Weiss of I'm playing against my own deck more so than I'm playing against what the opponent has.
Avatar is dead. You can't do soccer things anymore. Like, that was the only thing holding this set above water. There's some stuff that you can do that makes it playable. Like, the bar stuff is still fine. Like, even bar standby is still like a deck. It's just not as good. Not even close. The deck got its advantage by getting a bunch of extra attacks over the course of the game. It's just not there. Like, it doesn't have it anymore. I think that we can pretty safely say that if you're going to play Avatar, you've got to completely change the way you're going to do it.
Yeah, Avatar, I think, like, yes, you can still play the standby, and it is still, like, if you do that, it's 6 instances of 2 is what it ends up coming out to if you, like, fully resolve, which isn't bad, because some of those instances of 2 are actually secretly instances of 3. So, like, the numbers are pretty good as, like, a standby deck. I think the big problem now is that, like, you're playing a fair deck in general. If you can hit the 4-color stuff, I think that deck is actually, like, really good. The numbers on the Aang are still pretty good on paper. It's a big in practice versus on paper type thing, though. Shuffle back 2, burn 3, like, will be enough to get you there, especially if you can get 3 lanes of it.
I think that the 4 colorway is the way to go, just because realistically, as much as the 4 colors are great, hitting 3 colors is still fantastic, right? It's still shuffle back, burn 3, and then swing for 3. So it's essentially the 6 instances of 3 as opposed to the 6 instances of 2 / potentially 3.
Mm-hmm. Plus, the payoff from going from 3 colors hit to 4 colors hit, like 1 guaranteed damage, it's good.
Oh, yeah.
It's not a huge game changer.
No.
It makes your math really good, but in practice, that 1 extra damage doesn't win the game unless it, like, your opponent is at 3/6, canceling everything.
That's what the shuffle back I think is actually really significant there, is I think you kind of play into that same kind of idea like the Rushia, that as your swings continue on, because you can relatively easily tri-field this, that as you go down the line, essentially, of swings with your Aang, the more shuffle backs that you stack in there, the more likely your swings are going to be to stick. And you can play around with your opponent's compression at small deck states too, in that way too, like you could with Rushia. So like your opponent has to be a little bit more on guard as you get ready into that level 3 turn to like prepare in advance. So like they have to spend resources to like defend themselves. I think that the bar choice is going to be the way to play it going forward as opposed to standby, but at the same time, it also has a ceiling on where it goes to. Does it have some of those decompression tools too? Yeah, absolutely it does. But its mid-game is going to be a lot rougher in that regard.
You're going to be relying on, like, the early play healer and everything, which they have a good one. But it's like, you're playing a fair deck compared to what the abomination that it was beforehand.
So let's move on to talk about the new stuff. Got a half a dozen sets here that we want to talk about that have new releases. First, Ruby Premium. Ruby has kind of been outside the meta for a while now. It only had 1 top in Springfest. Brandon, does the new stuff make it relevant again?
It makes your finisher a little bit more consistent. Like regards to like it also increases like the damage push of it a little bit. For the most part, you're not adding a whole lot of new cards to the deck itself for the 8 standby build. So to that end, it's relatively the same tier as it was before. It has just a little bit more reach.
Yeah, I think Ruby is back at the point where it like placement in tier lists is about the same as what it was when it was like the peak, when at its peak performance with just set one. It's good. It has good matchups, but it also has some bad ones. It has its flaws, but I do think the new standby support is actually strong enough to help the deck keep up in the current format. Specifically, getting the Quince 2-2 combo. That combo is just good, and it helps. Like if you lean into that, it helps with your early game push a little bit more because you now get the 2 soul on like at level 1. So that does help with your damage. If you lean into like the split top ends, you can effectively do that where you have your level 3 standby, your level 2 standby targets and your level 3 standby targets. So you can lean into that, or you can go all in on the Ruby package, which I think is quite strong, getting like effectively like 4 to 5, maybe 6 instances of damage if like your opponent can't answer like your board or your back rows throughout the late game. Can be quite formidable, as well as Ruby being a very disruptive finisher even today, especially if anything is looking to hold board. The Ruby top end can definitely ruin some decks.
JoJo's, Stardust Crusaders, and Stone Ocean coming out next month. A lot of new cards for the IP. Didn't really do much when it first dropped in English. Do the new sets have anything that will make it relevant in the competitive scene?
I'm not super familiar with it. I know there's like the Jolene stuff for Stone Ocean, fairly good. I know there's a good salvage combo level 1 from the Stardust Crusader stuff. And I know that almost nothing from the Golden Wind set gets played. This is effectively all new, and I look forward to seeing what they're able to throw out.
So a lot of it's just basically anti-meta stuff. A lot of it's just kind of like stuff that can mess with your opponent's deck in kind of weird ways, like anti-marker, anti-character cards. Interesting tech pieces that can mess around with different things. There's a piece that can minus a significant amount of power from your opponent's board, so they can just kind of like straight up just kill things, which makes things a little more challenging with that. But ultimately, it just doesn't seem to have like the thresholds to be able to really step into that kind of really next tier, if that makes sense. Like it just doesn't quite have all of the necessary pieces to really put it all together in a really meaningful way.
So now let's get on to the stuff that only has new releases in English, and we'll start with Shauna. Probably the thing that's gotten the most attention is the anti-burn tech.
There's two thought processes when you're building Shauna. One is so they both play into anti-burn. Just it is only one-sided anti-burn as well is the other big thing. So only your opponent cannot burn, which is quite strong. But the two lines of thought are either you play double plussing combos and then just play a whole bunch of healers, or because you actually have really good healers in Shauna, or you actually play one of the finishers, either from the Shauna Premium Booster, or once Dengenki comes out, you'll play the Dengenki finisher. And typically, most lists do end up on the Dengenki finisher once that comes out. But the double plussing combos play this really nice level 0 check 4 combo that actually scales with your level and gains a level at every level as well. So it actually can like hold board against some decks. Like sometimes that level 0 will just beat like random level 1 combos on turn if you like level up mid combat, as well as like your back row support giving power to level 2s. So once you hit level 2, those zeros also power, but it is a check 4 on a choice. that you can start doing from basically the moment you say my turn, going first. The other one that sees a lot of play is it's just cigarettes at level 1 on a salvage trigger. So you just play double plussing combos. You're an experienced deck, so you do need, well, there's an experience card in the deck, so you end up playing a lot of level 3s anyway. So you just end up playing like 8 plus early play healers, or just your finishers also heal. So Shoshana has the Coco Icy Tail finisher from Hololive 1. That is an option you can play if you want to just go and burn all your resources in a single go. But that also does heal, and that is an on reverse Icy Tail that you technically don't have to pay for. If you want another finisher at the top end. But yeah, Shauna is mostly built around anti-damage, and every deck going into the format should look at having some way to get rid of a 1/1 in the back row.
Especially if you're dependent on burns for your deck, which most decks are, having a way to be able to remove that from field is necessary coming into this fall season.
Ayakashi Triangle. This one's been getting some attention. Brayden, I know that you're up on what this set has in it, so I'm just going to kind of let you lead the way on this one.
All right. So we've been seeing 2 lists primarily for Ayakashi. The big one is this 8 pants build that runs a lot of the Suzu. Effectively, all it is pants level 1 combo that's on climax play. You deck search for characters, and it's a level 0 on the board that sits at 5,500 power cross turn. It's like the least spectacular card you've ever read, but it is instant on climax placement deck search. The real sauce of 8 pants is the early play package, the 2/1 that draws you a card for damaging yourself from your waiting room, that then changes into the 3/2 from hand, which then heals 1 to memory on play, and then is a level 0 hexproof 11/5 on the board that has on attack with the pants to either heal 1 or burn 1. Your whole game plan in this list is sitting there with the giant, with these sizable hexproof bodies, healing 6 to 3 times, like 3, you heal 6 times if you try field it on the first, but you heal up to 3 times a turn until your opponent is close enough to death where you can actually go for a burn 1, burn 1, burn 1. The deck can run some off finishers, has some really good off finishers, has burn 4, it has early play Fumio, which is quite strong, and it has the ReZero anti-chain counter, which is also incredibly powerful, especially in multiples, as well as a neg2 soul character backup. Both of those backups are very strong. So in general, you're sitting on this giant hexproof body. You can't get blown up by Overlord. Overlord can side attack you for free because you're level 0, but they can not actually blow you up. You can get bombed out by SDS, unfortunately, which is why I think this deck is not top tier. I think this is why it's just good. But you can't be anti-changed, you can't be tap countered, you chosen, bounced, or interacted with effectively anyway, but your opponent can also just ignore it. It is not uncommon to see this deck heal up to like 12, maybe even like 15 times in a game, which is just an absolute ridiculous amount of healing. It's like sustain. The ability for the deck to stabilize at 2 is unparalleled in the current game. The other deck is 8 Standby, which is sort of the opposite. We have a non-interactive plussing level 1 standby combo, a costless level 1 plussing standby combo that gains Twin Drive. So that's already just a lot of bonus loaded up onto this level 1 standby. And then the top end is sort of like an aura effect, if you're familiar with other card games, where the 3/2 gives another 3/2 the finisher ability. And those can stack. So effectively, you spend the whole game not spending any resources, just ripping standby, getting your pluses, playing costless units from hand. And then at the very end, you pay out all your stock, dump all your hand for every, it's a pay two, pitch one. And as many times as you can pay that, you burn two. So it's not uncommon to see like 4, 5, 6 instances of burn two just at the end of a turn, just because you have enough stuff on your board. So those are the two lists. I think they're both very strong. They both have very strong anti-cheat counters. They both have very strong zero lineups. And they both play different enough, but very unique game plans to the game.
Yeah, and I think that that's where the strength of the set really comes in, partly with that anti-change counter being like so strong, and with the fact that it in itself can also like set up its own boards relatively efficiently and effectively, make it very, very strong deck to deal with. I have a general fondness for the 8 pants build specifically, just because I like the idea of healing over and over and over again so much. It also has the ability to just run away with the game very quickly.
Mm-hmm. The way the 8 pants deck will function is like it will hit 2, and regardless of how deep into 2 that you pushed it that turn, it will be at 2-0 going into your next turn. You then have the fun job of pushing Ayakashi Triangle to level 3 in one turn, effectively, while they're sitting there with their entire endgame board and everything. If you can, then you've probably got there. You probably have the game. But if you can't push them to 3 on that turn, they will heal another 3 effectively or more. So a lot of it does come down to that one turn. Ayakashi has plenty of ways to either recur the heals or to keep the heals that it currently has on board alive. Notably, one of those lanes, if they have the support out, is 15,000 cross turn before counters and swings in at 16. So enough to challenge Slime. Plus, Slime cannot like anti-backup it or choose it by effects, just like you can't choose theirs. So definitely good. The biggest problem, I think, and the biggest thing that'll hold 8 pants back is the prevalence of decks like Bochi the Rock and 7 Deadly Sins and other decks, specifically the Mirror, that have these cost bombs, these level 0 bombs. This is probably the single deck that also benefited the most from the Chainsaw Man hit, just because the people don't run the bombs anymore.
Moving on to Oshinoko. This one has been getting a lot of attention. It's a 3 combo list for the most part, 8 choice. Brandon, you think this thing has some potential. What does it do that gives it a shot against the stuff that's at the top tier right now?
I think the top end is relatively strong in trying to close out a game. Specifically, the ability to be able to, on damage, or when damage being canceled, to be able to mill the bottom 3 and then burn based off of the number of zeros revealed, like in instances of 2, is, I think, relatively strong. Because I think you're going to be hitting zeros regardless, because like it's level 0 versus like characters or climax specifically. So like you have a couple different options to be able to go through, and you're trying to keep those in your deck, right? You're trying to keep climaxes in your deck. So you're kind of already playing into their strategy a little bit. They can also play around with some of those things too, because they have the support to get there. They run the 2-1 combo that allows them to be able to, when damage is canceled, stock charge 2. And the climax itself also just being able to salvage a character. So like they are building up for their end game regardless whether or not you cancel or not. So like they're get the additional benefit for you canceling, which I think is really interesting as well. They typically either run the level 1 combo that is basically cigarettes with additional effects. We've been seeing more and more commonly that if it mills a level 2 or higher, that you can essentially hand fix, discard, and then salvage a card based off of it. You can not only get really good selection, but you can then also additionally potentially hand fix. I've seen a couple of people run the 2-card package that allows you to potentially pump up power and pump up soul, so you actually can have a pretty defensive wall at 1, being able to step over things like Spy Family and whatnot, but also be able to turn around and push additional soul at that same time frame. So it's like you can have a lot of flexibility with Oshinoko that really allows it to be able to respond pretty effectively depending on its matchup.
Yeah, like a lot of it is just building up to the finisher combo. The biggest problem I think that this set has is the level 0 lineup. Like none of the zeros outside of like a promo are like bigger than 2K or something. So like your 0 game like is almost non-existent. We haven't had a set with this bad of a 0 game for a minute, but luckily we're in a format right now that doesn't spend a lot of time at 0. So maybe we'll see that pop up. Maybe we'll see the promo explode in price. But I think that the finisher, it feels a lot like the set 1 Ichika finisher from Quince, which like the on cancel burn 2. That is a finisher that definitely kills people. Even by today's standard, that finisher is still good. It's just expensive to do. This one is just a cheaper version of it. So I do expect to see this. Plus, the IP is popular. People like Oshinoko.
Butchie the Rock. We've seen it already. It featured prominently in France and did quite well for itself. A handful of tops. Pretty much everyone is on this bar salvage list. Garners a lot of comparisons to the 8 salvage Quince list. It's very similar in a lot of ways. The level 1 combo is basically the exact same thing. Obviously, the reason that it did so well in France more than anything else was representation based. Like 7 of the 18 teams had it. But there's definitely something going on with this list. It's definitely got an opportunity to at least make some noise come fall. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I think this set's really well positioned. Imagine the plus hand support from Quince, except you gave it a soul trigger instead of frontal 500, and like that's already like the most broken card in like the game almost. But the Quince level 1 combo is obviously amazing at generating massive hand size. The ability to have effectively a Marine costed level 3 that does more damage than Marine, just being at the end of attack versus on attack, which is a downside. There's not a lot of memory punch right now because there's not a lot of things to answer with memory punch, but you are susceptible to that. Keep that in mind. But being a Marine on play as well as burn 3 at the end of attack is very strong. Having, unlike Quince, something that you have that's they don't is A, you're not name restricted like Quince is, but B, you have a pseudo stock swap. Honestly, pseudo stock swap will just get you there. It is a roll effectively. It's much more of a roll than like actual true stock swap is. But the fact that your combo can pick up your stock swap event is very strong. And then you have a very solid early play healing plan, a very affordable early play plan. And you're also just another deck that gets to run cost bombs, which in this current format is still quite strong, or zone bombs.
I think you can definitely draw a lot of comparisons to that kind of 8 salvage Quince build that we looked at a little bit last time. That in many ways it has fresher profiles and a little bit more decompression to it, but at the same time also has that same kind of feel of 8 salvage Quince as well.
Finally, last one, Freerin, coming out November 22nd. It's getting attention less for being particularly good in its own right, but rather because it is a pretty hard counter to Overlord.
So there's level 0 that allows you to be able to essentially target a specific spot on the field and remove markers from it, which allows you to instantly remove markers from Eins, which is really interesting. It can effectively take away the burn ones that would go to memory. Eins still has the burn one on the combo itself, and still has the healing itself, but being able to remove the markers from that makes the Overlord player play their deck a little bit differently, or have to like adjust accordingly, which at least makes things interesting. The deck itself feels a lot like the new Kaguya builds or like Danmachi, where it's pretty event heavy, where you're basically kind of playing your game, playing the events until you get to your end game.
Yep, the list overall is quite good, and it did perform very well in Japan on release. This is also a set that is the IP, people really like this IP, so people will be playing a lot of it on release, I feel. But yeah, the event package is very strong with the level 1 Fern grabbing up to like the 2 different events. The level 3s, people are running both the trial deck and the main boost combos, typically staying to 8 pants. But the other things that this set has, the yellow early play and being an off finisher is very strong. The Himo the Hero level 0, also a very good utility piece. I think the deck will perform quite well coming on release in the season. I think it has the tools to keep up. And it's like I'm excited for people to actually start playing it as well. There's also an 8-book build that floats around ever so often. I don't think that one will see us play. Same with like the standby bar build that like floats around ever so often. I don't think that one will see play either, even though those did well during the Free-Run Cups in Japan. I think the other stuff in the format will bully those a little too much.
Well, that's it for this one. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll be back with more of this series, part 3, in a few months when we get into the winter, because we got more stuff coming out. Nika got us a victory, quintessential quintuplets, and whatever else gets announced that is worth talking about. We will make sure to cover it then. Thank you once again, Brayden, for joining us. We will have more videos again Tuesdays and Thursdays. We are back to our regular schedule. So until next time, thank you so much for joining us. Please like, share, comment, and subscribe, and have a good one.
We'll see you then.